There's rumor of a Dirty Dancing sequel.
When they offer me $10 million for the sequel, which I wish I'd take.
Is this true?
I don't know.
Patrick Swayze was dying. The cameras were gone, the applause had long since faded, and the man who had once made the entire world believe in love, in dance, in magic, was lying in a hospital bed, running out of time. And in those final months, something shifted inside him. The careful image, the guarded interviews, the polished version of the story he had told for over 2 decades. All of it began to crack open, because when a man knows he is running out of days, he stops protecting the myth and starts telling the truth. And the truth about Dirty Dancing, one of the most beloved films in cinema history, was far more complicated, far more painful, and far more human than anyone had ever been allowed to see. This is the story Patrick Swayze wanted the world to know. Not the fairy tale. The real thing. To understand what happened on the set of Dirty Dancing, you first have to understand the man who walked onto it. Patrick Wayne Swayze was born on August 18, 1952, in Houston, Texas, into a household where discipline was not a suggestion, it was oxygen. His mother, Patsy Swayze, was one of the most respected choreographers in the region, a woman who ran her dance studio like an institution of excellence. She did not raise her children to be soft. She raised them to be extraordinary. And Patrick, her eldest son, received the full force of that expectation from the moment he could stand upright. By the time other boys in his Houston neighborhood were playing in the streets or dreaming about Little League, Patrick was already deep inside the world of dance. Ballet, jazz, gymnastics, figure skating. His body was being shaped, stretched, and disciplined in ways most children never experience. And while part of him embraced it, loved the feeling of movement, loved the power and grace that training gave him, another part of him ached for something more ordinary, something rough and free. That desire found expression on the football field. Patrick threw himself into the sport with the same ferocity he brought to dance, dreaming of a scholarship, dreaming of a different kind of glory. But the human body does not always cooperate with human dreams. A serious knee injury during a high school game ended that chapter without warning. One moment, the future seemed wide open. The next, it collapsed beneath him on a field in Texas. Most people would have taken months to recover. Patrick took weeks, and then pivoted entirely. If football would not have him, then the stage would. He moved deeper into martial arts, studied under serious instructors, and eventually made his way to New York City in the early 1970s, where he trained with the Joffrey Ballet and the Harkness Ballet, two of the most prestigious institutions in American dance. The city was cold and unforgiving. The studios were merciless. Instructors cared nothing for his background or his mother's reputation. They cared only about what his body could do, what his mind could endure, and how far he was willing to push past the edge of comfort into genuine mastery. Patrick pushed. He always pushed. But just as his path toward a serious dance career was opening up, just as choreographer Elliot Feld was envisioning a partnership between Swayze and the legendary Mikhail Baryshnikov, that same damaged knee betrayed him again. Reconstruction surgery. Months of recovery. Another dream rerouted. He turned toward the stage, then toward film. Small parts, forgettable films, character roles in television. He danced for Disney. He appeared in the Broadway production of Grease. He took whatever the industry offered him and found a way to make it matter. But stardom remained elusive, a shape on the horizon that kept shifting every time he got close. By the time the mid-1980s arrived, Patrick Swayze was known in the industry. He was respected. He was talented. But he was not yet a phenomenon. That required one specific script, one low-budget summer film, and a set of circumstances that would test everything he thought he knew about himself. Dirty Dancing was not supposed to change anything. When the project was first assembled, it had none of the hallmarks of a prestige production. The budget was modest to the point of being almost insulting. The studio that picked it up, Vestron Pictures, was a relatively small operation that distributed films rather than building them from the ground up. The story, a young woman from a privileged family who falls for a working-class dance instructor at a summer resort in the Catskills during the early 1960s, was considered charming but small. Commercial, perhaps, but not important. Not the kind of film that gets remembered. The director, Emile Ardolino, was known primarily for documentary work. The producer, Linda Gottlieb, was passionate but operating without the safety net of a major studio behind her. And the script, written by Eleanor Bergstein, drew heavily from her own personal experiences that were intimate and specific in ways that Hollywood executives found difficult to market. And yet, something about the material refused to be dismissed. When Patrick Swayze read the character of Johnny Castle, something clicked inside him that he later struggled to fully explain. Johnny was a dance instructor at a resort, technically proficient, physically commanding, but also burdened. He carried the weight of a man who knows exactly what he is worth, and is constantly surrounded by people who disagree. There was dignity in Johnny, but also defiance. There was hunger. There was the specific ache of someone who has real gifts living in a world that refuses to recognize them. Patrick understood that ache from the inside. The knee injuries, the redirected dreams, the years of small roles and near misses. He had lived inside that particular kind of frustration, and he recognized it immediately on the page. He wanted the role with a certainty that surprised even him. But there was a complication. A significant one. Before Dirty Dancing, before Johnny and Baby, before the lift and the final dance, and the line that would be quoted for decades, there was Red Dawn. Released in 1984, Red Dawn was a Cold War action film in which Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey had already shared screen. The experience had not been smooth. Not because of any dramatic falling out or public confrontation, but because of something subtler and in many ways harder to resolve, a fundamental clash of personalities and working methods. Patrick arrived on every set with the discipline of a classically trained dancer. His process was architectural. He built a performance from the ground up, with precision and structure, working outward from the physical mechanics of a scene toward its emotional core. He believed in repetition. He believed in getting things right. He believed that excellence was a matter of crafting each element until it could not be improved. Jennifer Grey worked from the opposite direction entirely. Her instincts were emotional, intuitive, immediate. She did not build a performance so much as feel her way into one, responding to the moment rather than following a predetermined map. Her vulnerability was not a weakness. It was, in fact, her greatest strength as an actress. But it made her process look chaotic to someone trained to see dance and performance as a matter of technical mastery. In Red Dawn, these two approaches had not found a way to coexist comfortably. There was friction, quiet, professional, but persistent. And when Jennifer Grey learned that Patrick Swayze had been cast as her leading man in Dirty Dancing, her reaction was not enthusiasm. She was, by her own later admission, deeply apprehensive. The tension from their previous experience together had not dissolved with time. If anything, it had settled into a kind of low-level dread. She had concerns about working with him again, concerns that went beyond simple preference into something more deeply felt. Patrick knew it too, and knowing it, he made a decision that revealed more about his character than perhaps any role he ever played. Before a single frame of Dirty Dancing had been shot, before the cameras were even set up, he approached Jennifer privately. He did not arrive as a movie star protecting his professional reputation. He arrived as a human being who understood that something needed to be addressed before it poisoned everything they were about to attempt together. He apologized, genuinely, openly, without qualification. He told her he understood her hesitation. He told her he was sorry for whatever had made their previous experience uncomfortable. And he asked, not demanded, not assumed, for the chance to begin again. Jennifer Grey would later say that this moment changed everything. The man who approached her that day was not the guarded, controlled professional she had butted up against on a previous set. He was real and human and brave enough to be the first one to put down his armor. The walls came down. Not entirely, not immediately, but enough. Enough to begin. Lake Lure, North Carolina, in the summer of 1986, was not a glamorous filming location. The heat was relentless and physical, the kind that settles into your clothing and stays there, turning every hour of work into an endurance test. The production schedule was demanding, the crew was stretched, and the pressure of delivering something extraordinary on a budget that left almost no margin for error pressed down on everyone involved. For Patrick, the physical demands of the role compounded everything else. His knee, the same knee that had derailed his football career, the same knee that had ended his chance at a serious ballet career, was not healthy. It had never been fully healthy, not since the first injury in high school. And the choreography that Dirty Dancing demanded was intense, sustained, and completely unforgiving of structural weakness. He danced through pain. Every single day. He hid the severity of it from the production because he knew, with the certainty of a man who had already lost major opportunities to physical failure, that if the extent of his injury became widely known, the project might collapse or be recast. So he wrapped the knee, gritted his teeth, and delivered. Off camera, he was not always easy to be around during this period. Pain has a way of shortening patience, and Patrick's patience, already not his most abundant quality, grew thin under the combination of physical suffering and his own relentless perfectionism. He acknowledged this later, honestly, and without defensiveness. He said he was not always kind, not always fair, that his frustration sometimes came out sideways, landing on people who did not deserve it, including Jennifer. The particular friction between them during filming was real and documented. It existed at the intersection of their genuinely different working methods. He would grow visibly frustrated when takes had to be repeated because of what he perceived as a failure of technical preparation. She would retreat into anxiety, which sometimes manifested as nervous laughter, an involuntary response she could not control, which deepened his frustration further. There were days, confirmed by multiple crew members who spoke about the production over the years, when Patrick and Jennifer would not make eye contact between takes. They would stand apart, each caught inside their own private weather system of stress and feeling, and then the director would call action, and something extraordinary would happen. They would look at each other and become Johnny and Baby, and the chemistry that ignited between them was so genuine and so overwhelming that even the most experienced people on set found themselves watching it with something approaching wonder. The anger was real. The exhaustion was real. The pain was real. And somehow, in ways that neither of them could fully explain, all of it poured directly into the performances and made them burn hotter. Of all the moments in Dirty Dancing, the lift is the one that endures. Decades after the film's release, it remains one of the most recognizable images in popular cinema. Patrick Swayze with his arms extended. Jennifer Grey running toward him across the shallow water. The moment she leaves the ground and he raises her overhead, steady and certain, and the music swells. It looks effortless. It looks inevitable. It looks like two people who were born to share that exact moment in that exact way. The truth, as Patrick would eventually reveal, was considerably more complicated. Jennifer Grey refused to rehearse the lift. This was not a creative choice. This was not an artistic preference for spontaneity over preparation. This was fear, deep, physical, visceral fear. She was terrified of being dropped. She was terrified of the height. And no amount of coaxing, reasoning, or professional persuasion from Patrick could move her past that fear before the cameras rolled. For Patrick, who had built his entire professional identity on the belief that physical performance required meticulous preparation, her refusal to rehearse felt like an act of sabotage. He could not understand it. He trained for this. He had spent his entire life training for this. Muscle memory was not a philosophy to him, it was a survival strategy. You rehearsed until the movement lived in your body independent of your conscious mind, so that when the pressure came, the body knew what to do even when the mind was screaming. Jennifer's instinct went exactly the other direction. She could not rehearse the thing she was afraid of. The more she tried, the worse the fear became. Her only option was to commit entirely in the moment, without the safety net of repetition. So when the day arrived, the actual shooting day, with the cameras in position and the crew watching, and no more time remaining, they had never once successfully completed the lift together in rehearsal. Patrick would later say that he had never been more terrified on a film set. Not of the physical mechanics, those he could manage, but of the possibility that the moment would not work, that Jennifer's fear would win, that the film's emotional climax would collapse under the weight of everything unresolved between them. She ran toward him. In the accounts he gave years later, he described watching her build speed across that shallow water and feeling something shift, something ancient and instinctive, beyond choreography and beyond anger, and beyond the accumulated weight of every frustration between them. She was trusting him. Completely. In the most literal and physical sense possible, she was leaving the ground and trusting him to be there. He caught her. He raised her. She was overhead, balanced and perfect, and the camera was rolling, and the moment was real and unrehearsed and entirely impossibly right. One take. They never needed another. Patrick said afterward that something changed in him when he felt her weight in his hands in that moment. All the frustration, all the impatience, all the professional friction. It did not disappear, but it rearranged itself into something he could see clearly for the first time. She had given him the only thing he had ever really wanted from any partner, absolute trust. And she had given it at the moment when it cost her the most. The film opened in August of 1987. The response was not what the studio had anticipated. It was several orders of magnitude beyond anything they had imagined. Audiences did not merely like Dirty Dancing. They adopted it. They returned to it again and again. They memorized the dialogue and the choreography. They bought the soundtrack in numbers that turned it into one of the best-selling albums of the decade. They carried the film inside themselves the way you carry a piece of music that found you at exactly the right moment. Patrick Swayze became a phenomenon overnight. But the man inside the phenomenon was watching all of it with the specific, complicated feelings of someone who knows what the experience actually cost. In interviews throughout the late 1980s,